All right, guys. So I'm super excited. Ryan is one of my long-term fitness heroes. I've been a customer of GMB for a long time. But Ryan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, let's get into it. Yeah, so I'm Ryan Hurst from GMB Fitness. And let's see, how long has it been now in GMB Fitness? You think I would know this by now. It's almost 15 years that we've been around. Been in the fitness world for quite a while. I'm 50 years old right now. Actually, I'll be 51 next month. And so much I could talk about. But let's just say I've been around for a little while. Yeah, so.
And the early start of GMB, what drew you to, I guess, body weight training primarily?
Yeah, so when I was a wee lad, I would say around 5 or 6 years old, I started gymnastics. And I competed in gymnastics actually until I was 18 years old. At the same time, I got really, really interested in martial arts. And so when I was in junior high, I would go to my gymnastics practice and then afterwards go to my martial art practice. I didn't study very much, is basically what I'm trying to say in school. My study was mainly about the body and, yeah, moving around and having fun. So I did that. And then when I was 18, graduated from high school and ended up going to Japan. And so I moved to Japan and I went to Japan actually to do martial art. And I was only supposed to be there for, it was a, when I first went over, it's called my English is faltering. It was a exchange student program.
Like an Uchideshi program.
Well, actually, that wasn't at that time. So what I just was going over just for the uni over there. And so to go to university over there, and I went over and I wanted to do kendo and judo and went in there and my instructor took a liking to me. I ended up staying and living with him and did an uchideshi. So I was a live-in student and ended up just staying. I did have to come back to the United States to graduate because it was, like a sister program that they had. And so I had to come back and stay in the United States for the final semester, which was really rough on me. But anyway, I moved right back to Japan. I got a job working in Japan and just stayed there. I worked at a martial arts complex within a shrine for 8 years. And it was
Like
great.
early 20s until 30 then.
Yes, that's correct. And so that's actually right towards the end of that. So I was with a different fitness organization in the United States. So I was living in Japan, of course, but I just really, really wanted to improve my judo and my martial art and really got interested into joint mobility as well as different ways. Instead of like taking people down to the ground and tying them in a pretzel, how can I help to keep myself going as well as help other people? And that's where I really got into the joint mobility side of things. Ended up working with a fitness organization. I became the program director for them. And that's where I met Andy and Jarlo, my business partners in GMB. And
I'm going to say
so,
that
yeah.
that business probably had the name gymnastics in it.
No, it did not. No, it did
I
not.
thought you were referring to GB back and again,
No, no, I'm
this
not.
stuff has morphed dramatically over the last decade, just like yours has.
Yes, tremendously. And in the very beginning, when we first actually started off in GMB, we actually had a program that the three of us did together before we were officially GMB. And it was a yoga based program. And Jarlo actually, so I'm in the United States right now. I moved my family over here in November. We can get into that later. But I was still in Japan and Jarlo, a business partner, he was, my best friend at the time, and he flew over because I was doing a television program in Japan related to joint mobility. I was doing it in Japanese. So I was doing it, it was a joint mobility program and a yoga based program. And it was different than any of the yoga there. Not that yoga is static, but there was a lot of movement. It was a lot of flow and just kind of like basically this stuff, right? Like what I kind of do now anyway. And so there is a television channel called Gaoda in Japan, and they were like, hey, we want to do a TV program. You want to do it? And I'm like, sure. And so we shot it. I think it was like 8 episodes. And anyway, that became the DVD. And then what we did was Jarla came over, and I actually doing a recording, a voiceover in English, which is hilarious because I did it in Japanese first. Came over, Jarla came over, helped me work on the script, and then I did it in English, and we sold that. So that was kind of our first thing. And then GMB came
Back in the
about.
day
Yeah,
when fitness
back in the
products were
day, man. DVD, like the young people nowadays, no idea, right? And
I always tell
yeah.
people my first experience with corrective exercise was Paul Chek's back
Oh my
8 series,
goodness,
which are 18 VHS tapes that I
dude.
watched back to back to back over a period, like about a week straight of just watching videos every day. And
I
people
remember
are like,
those days.
what do you mean? Like, well, you couldn't go into Learn Dash or Kajabi or whatever and have all these videos that you could watch on demand. You had to have a VCR player and these big clunky tapes, and the thing turned up in like this box,
I remember that.
so many tapes. It was ridiculous.
So it's funny you mention that because when I was in Japan, there's a guy named Tony Blauer. He's still around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, Tony Blauer, and he had this. It's the spear system, self-defense thing. And back then though, there was a program called Be Your Own Bodyguard. I did the same thing, and I ordered it was
I
VHS, and this
remember it.
huge box came to Japan. I was like, yeah. Anyway, that's so funny, but yeah. So GMB came about, and after that, we decided to make it official. And Jarlo actually came up with the name, originally Gold Medal Bodies. And it wasn't because we were wanting to go to the Olympics or anything like that. It was simply looking at, okay, in your event in life, what do you need a gold medal body for? And so it was all about why are you doing this? And we started off with rings, the gymnastic rings.
Yeah.
And
And we
yeah,
talked about this before we started, but I had that
yeah,
program. I had parallettes, I had floor.
that's
Um,
crazy.
the parallettes program was probably my favorite. That's a really fun program.
And I will say I had the most fun back in those days shooting that. And I think what it was, for some reason, that program it was easy for me to make. I just don't know what it was. It was just like, all right, let's do it. And just did it. And the shoot went well and it was well received. And I just had a lot of fun with that. But back in the day, though, I mean, we're talking again, like almost 15 years ago, which is crazy to think about. But what I do is I would come up with the programming for it, and I would actually do the actual program and go through it myself to test it, hopefully find somebody else to test it with me, and then I would shoot it. And that was like every 3 months we were putting stuff out. And in the very beginning back then, and again, it was like DVD, and eventually though, it was all online. And as we were talking about before we started here, the major shift was when we came out with Elements. And so Elements, Andy Jarlo and I were actually teaching this seminar in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I flew from Japan, flew in, and it was great because back then we would always try and meet up somewhere and teach these seminars. At the time, I had a gym in Japan, and so I wasn't working at the martial arts complex at all. My boss, just the most amazing man. Thanks to him, he was just amazing. But he said, I want you to quit and I want you to do your own thing. And I was like, okay. And I did. And I made so many mistakes and failed and lost so much money, but it was great. I learned a whole lot.
Welcome to the fitness business.
Exactly, right? But I had this gym called Jungle Gym, and it was mainly for kids. And so I had these kids classes. And what I was doing is I was also teaching in English because over in Japan, you can charge double, like, hey, I teach in English. Your kid will learn English
Yeah,
as I'm
yeah.
teaching a thing, whatever.
It's very weird in fitness, and it's actually our biggest fitness convention here.
Yeah.
We'll pay, it's about 3 or 4 times the money for a speaker from the States to come.
No.
In some of the cases, yeah, yes. If you know who Perry Nicholson is, I'm the only person in Australia who's
Yes.
presented alongside him, and they will pay him 10,000. They'll offer me five. Yeah, because
What?
technically you can just come down the street and train with me, so I'm not this exclusive commodity. And and the same when I go teach in the US, people will fly from all over the country to come and be in that workshop because I'm that strange Australian guy.
Yeah.
But when I run
Yeah.
the workshop here, it can be really difficult to fill up. It's the weird perception people have about
No, that
something
is.
that's seemingly foreign, exclusive,
Exactly.
special. Yeah.
Exactly. But that's how it was, yeah. And I totally, yeah. And so But during the classes, it was funny because a lot of the movements that we would do as warm up and conditioning for judo. And it was these ground-based movements. And what I just did was, to make it interesting for the kids, I'd put the name on it, a bear or a monkey and all this stuff. And we had each movement, animal movement was in there.
So you had 26 different movements.
Now that was at the gym though. And so I went to Andy and Jarlo and I was like, hey guys, check it out. I got this idea for this program. It's 3 movements. And they're like, what are you talking about? And worked through it, and that became elements. And that is our foundation of GMB now. And so you were asking, and mentioning, things have changed so much over the years, and what is it? And really, as we were saying, we found a lot of people chasing skills rather than taking a look at, okay, this is what I really need in order to do the things in my life that I really want to do. And so we wanted to bring it to the method. And so we focused on really solidifying the methodology and looking at having a process for people to be able to go through to know where they are so that they can then follow that to do the things that are going to help them, again, to do the things in their life that they want to do. Their sport, maybe they don't do sport. Maybe they just want to get down on the ground and be able to play with their kids or their dog or whatever. It's a matter of figuring out exactly what you need. So with Jarlo, because, Dr. Physical Therapy went through that looking at, okay, we have an assessment. So we assess, we address, and we apply. So we have our AAA framework that we use. And so by addressing what you need, figuring out what's going on, assessing what's going on, and then we look at addressing your needs. And then the application part of that is doing the program or doing the thing, using the protocol that's going to help you to be able to do the thing. Compared to our very first program, which was rings, which I still think is fun, but it's so completely different because it was based mainly around sets and reps rather than the way that we train now, which is we do reps, but it's time-based. So rather than trying to say you're going to do 10 repetitions, we say, no, set the clock, do 1 repetition as beautifully as you can, and then simply try and do another one. And so really trying to use a lot of the foundation for the 3 of us in our martial art background, where it's how many reps of this am I going to do? Doesn't matter. You're going to do it until you're able to do it well and do it in a way where you need it. And that's really what we're trying to do, is bring that awareness into fitness rather than just cranking out sets and reps.
Do you think for me, I find that's always a big roadblock, that there is a big focus on what someone wants versus what they need. Like, I can recall a customer he'd had 2 minor heart procedures. He'd been in hospital for a really serious infection that actually ended up in his spine, so nearly lost the ability to walk. Was walking with a cane for 6 months, and then came up to me not long after that at Christmas time and said, look, I've got goals for the next year. I want to clean and jerk body weight and squat this and deadlift this. I'm like, you're 50 years old. It's not like you're a great squatter to begin with. For instance, maybe your focus for the next 12 months should be just don't go to hospital, and we should figure out what you need to do to make that happen. It was like I was talking another language. I could see the look in his eyes like, no, but I want to clean and jerk body weight. The discrepancy between want and need. Have you seen that change in your customers over time?
Absolutely. And, we still have people come in and they'll see a video of me or somebody in GMB do something, let's say like a 1-arm handstand or something like that. And they'll come in and send an email and they'll say, hey, I want to do a 1-arm handstand. I want to have a double body weight, clean and jerk. I want to also be able to do a planche, and I want to do this in 3 months. We're not the people for you.
Planche in 3 months would be pretty impressive.
That would be very impressive. But this is the thing, is that what we're trying to do is, even though we're in the fitness world, we don't actually consider ourselves fitness trainers. We consider ourselves educators. And so coach, if you will. And so in the sense that going to really want to get to the heart of your why. Why do you want to be able to do this stuff? I'm not saying you shouldn't, but why? What is the real underlying why that you want to do this? Let's look at that. And then let's figure out what you can do right now and start working from there. And so I think a big thing of this is we see all these sparkly, shiny things out there that look cool on Instagram or whatever. And we don't see the hard work and the many, many, many years and struggle that it takes a person to get to a certain level. And while certain things, I think
That one hand handstand, because you've been able to do them, I don't know if you can do them now, but how many
not like I used to, yeah.
how many hours of practice do you think you put in going from not able to do a handstand to freestanding easily at will anytime you wanted to a full one-handed handstand for a decent period of time? Like, how many hours of training is that?
Yeah, it was crazy. Well, when I started my one arm handstand training, I could already do a handstand. But the thing of it is there's a huge, huge jump between, 2 and 1. And, when I started working with my coach, he flat out told me, he says, I don't think you're going to be able to do it because of your age. And that's the last thing you want to tell me, to be honest. But that's a whole other story, Yeah. But I spent it, I got it in 3 months. But the thing of it is literally that's all I did. I did no other work except for focusing on that. And I did 2 sessions a day, minimum of an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And I did that every single day for 3 months. And so, and this is the other thing is, a lot of people might have the time to do it. Are you hard-headed enough to wake up every single morning, be disciplined to say, I feel like crap, but I'm still going to do it? And so there's the other thing of this that now a lot of people that I want to, talk to them about is, does this serve you? And I think that's the biggest thing. Does this serve you? Like, just because someone is able to do something doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good for you. And this is where
So the one-handed handstand, I mean, the thing I noticed most when I was doing a lot of handstands is how stiff my forearms got. Like, I got to the point where the only time I could actually get my wrists to 90 degrees was if I was actually on them, because my forearms were so tight the rest of the time.
yeah.
How did your hands and shoulders cope with that volume of handstand stuff? Like, what were you doing to offset it all? Because I imagine you had to do a bunch of like rehab stuff just to keep yourself healthy enough to do that volume.
And you're correct, and that's what it was, and that's why I actually didn't do anything else. So imagine if I were to say, well, I'm going to work on the one-arm handstand, I'm also going to work on my kettlebell snatches, or I'm going to, no, that's not going to work. I'm just sorry, and especially in 3 months. So literally what I was doing was only focusing on that one-arm handstand and the things I needed to do to make sure that I could show up each day. So a lot of wrist work. This was the thing, exactly what you said. The forearms take such a killing that you've got to supplement and make sure that you're able to get on your hands, because what it is you actually have to move beyond that. So this is one of the things that I actually don't recommend to just, the regular Joe out there, but you have to work through it. You have to just say, this is going to suck, but I'm going to have to get through it in order to get to the point where it doesn't suck anymore. And so this is why, this is another phrase that I like to say is embrace the suck. And there's 2 ways to look at this. It can be like, this is going to be really tough, okay? But the other thing that I look at in terms of what I'm talking about when I say embrace the suck is understand you're not going to be good at something. You're going to suck at something. And the faster you can embrace that fact, the easier it is to kind of let go and to just focus on the thing that's in front of you. And so this is, I think, what's also important, because we've got that physical, I don't want to say pain, but physical discomfort. But what's really going to come down on us is that mental discomfort. And typically what happens, in that we see this a lot, and with my clients and the people that I work with, is the first thing is that they come into GMB because they're like, wow, this is really different. I've seen people do this before and it just looks so easy, and they try it and they're like, this is not as easy as I thought. And that mental weight, if you will, of, oh my God, I really suck at this. Should I quit? I don't look like Ryan, And I'm like, hold on. I've been doing this since I'm 5 years old.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So
45 years of practice.
exactly. So this is where, embrace the suck and understand that it's not going to feel great, but it's also not going to look great. And so just let go of it. Just
I
put
think
in the
the other
practice and do it.
people forget that, I mean, as an example, so like, I mean, I've got a decent background in suffering for long periods of time. And
Yes, you do.
handstand workouts, I mean, like, like maybe 3 days without sleep kind of stuff. And people think that it must be easy for me. And I remember there's a really popular track that you can walk on in Papua New Guinea, which was a significant World War II site for Australia. So like if the Japanese had crossed Papua New Guinea, Australia basically would be Japanese now. And
Gotcha.
so really famous battle site, very difficult terrain, steep mountains, difficult path. And day one, you just walk up into the mountains basically. So it's uphill all day, tropical environment, it's super hot and humid.
Yeah.
You're in the sun. And I remember we got to the top of this hill for a break, and my brother's not in the same sort of shape as me. But I said to him, oh, hey, how you doing? Like, are you going okay? And he's like, oh, I'm really struggling. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, look at me, I'm all sweaty. And I said, hey, look at me. I'm sweating just as much. Like, the difference
Yep.
is I expect to sweat. The difference is I
Right.
expect to get out of breath. And when it happens, I'm not surprised. Whereas you're expecting it to be easy, I'm expecting it to be miserable. When it's miserable, it's like it's my friend because that's what I thought was
Yes.
going to happen. If it was easy, I'd be concerned. Like something's strange here, my body's not working right. You're expecting because of some training that things are going to be easy, but I mean, Greg LeMond had a fantastic saying about training is it never gets easier. You just pedal harder. So like doesn't matter how fit you are because you just keep pushing the level up and you're
Right.
always uncomfortable. And I would think for you, after 45 years of practice, you're probably pretty good at being uncomfortable.
Extremely. And that's something you and I think are both a little weird in the sense like I enjoy that because that reminds me that I'm alive. And like you said, if things are easy for me, I kind of get nervous because I feel it's not that I'm not pushing myself, it's that it feels like the practice isn't where it needs to be for me. And
I
this is
think
the
on
other
an
thing.
existential level, without challenge, humans can't thrive.
Yes, exactly. I totally agree. And the one other thing too is coming back to the mental side of this is we always have the opportunity to reframe how we look at it, just like you said. And so when I'm doing something, it might be an easy movement, but I can make it difficult. And that I think is a huge difference. And a person who can really move well and knows movement is that they will take a basic movement and make it difficult in order to challenge themselves to learn more. And I think that so many people are so anxious to try and get to the next progression or variation of something that they miss out on the opportunity to really not only get good at a particular variation of a movement, but learn more about themselves when they're doing it. And so as I get older, I'm trying not to be as anxious. And in fact, I've cut out so much stuff in my life in order to focus more on less. And I got to tell you, man, I feel the best I think I've ever felt. And
I think that's
yeah, I
something
love it.
I get told all the time by people like, you're so lucky, your life's so simple. Because I have three things. I have work, I have relationships, I have training. Everything else, if it doesn't relate to those three things, I'm not interested. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that I'm not being bombarded by those things all the time, but people don't realize how difficult it is to cut those things out. It's same as throwing away all the junk in your house can be really freeing,
Yeah.
like and going to a more minimal lifestyle.
Yeah.
People think that they have to have this massive array of stuff going on to be happy, and actually, in most people's cases, they'd be happy with far less, but doing it far better. That's
Heck yeah.
an interesting point. Do you think that that's as you've gone through the progression with your stuff, the focus on quality over quantity, has that changed things, do you think, for the better for your customers?
I think so. You know, this has been a huge part of me, just having lived in Japan for 28 years, is that I'm always looking to refine, if you will, and cut out the fat. And so, even though there are certain things that I want to keep exploring, it's a matter of going deeper rather than gathering more, if that makes sense. So even in the programs, to be perfectly honest, I would love to cut out a lot of the stuff, like so much stuff. But people do crave freshness, newness. And so there is a good point, I should say, in terms of having some of those things in there. But I think that the importance of that is understanding how it's used. Instead of just throwing more stuff on there, whenever we have something in the program, to me, it's got to serve a purpose. And it can't just be in there just to be novel, if you will. Except if it is for the sake of being novel. So we do have a program where that is the case. And the reason for that is because we're looking more at the neuroscience of skill acquisition and learning and being open to that. So that's a whole other thing. But when it comes to simply training and looking at, so originally it was a vitamin. And so we've actually, yeah. And so the vitamin was that 28-day program where every single day you're presented with a new movement and you didn't know what movement it was going to be. And so what we're looking at there is this neuroplasticity where you go into something and your body starts, or your mind starts to see patterns, and they start to understand and become better at accepting those within the body. And so what this does is it helps you to be able to move better eventually. And that's what that whole program was all about. Now, we no longer have that.
Just as the old dog's new trick thing, that if you don't keep working at that as you get older, that's actually something you're going to lose. Like I find actually,
yes,
like you, I've cut out a lot of things in terms of my training, but I also deliberately spend time doing some weird things, like even burpees, because I want to be able to do something like that. And I know that I'm 52 in a couple of weeks, so we're about the same age. If I stop, I'll be stopped. I won't be able to do that thing anymore. I have to keep doing it just so I can keep doing it.
So, yeah, sorry to interrupt. I totally agree. And so this is where, when I say to cut out, this is why the way that we have things structured is when you're, well, let me just go through the 5 Ps real quick, if that's okay. So the way that we program things is we have the 5 Ps. So we start off, and the first thing is a prep. And so I don't like to say warm up, because what it is we're preparing the body for the particular thing that we're practicing that day. So let's say, for example, handstand. You're going to work and practice a handstand, okay? Well, I want you to make sure that you warm up your wrist, warm up your shoulders, and there's some other places we'll warm up, but we're prepping those joints, the wrist, the shoulders, to make sure that you're good and ready to start your practice, which is the next point in there. And so what we're doing is, again, we're looking at time. We're not looking at repetition. So we might set the clock for, let's say, 15 minutes. Doesn't mean you're going to do consecutive handstands for 15 minutes or anything. It's you try a handstand at a level that's good for you, wherever that might be, and then you give yourself a little break, and then when the timer's done, you're done. And that's it. And then the next part of that, though, is play. And this is what is missing from so many programs out there, is the aspect of play. And a lot of people think, oh, you're just going to run around and use a hula hoop or something. But I'm like, no. We're looking at exploration, and what we're doing. Yeah, that sounds kind of fun to me. But what we're doing is we're taking a movement that we're already familiar with, that we've already practiced, and we're using it at a level that's good for us, so that we can start expanding the box, if you will. And so it could simply be a matter of, let's say that you don't have a handstand, but you can do, let's say that you can do a kick up against the wall. And so when you kick up against the wall, this time to explore, what you do is you try to actually loosen your legs a little bit to see what it feels like. So even, rather than
like your monkey would be a great way to do that, right?
Absolutely, that's exactly right.
With a high leg action,
Right.
end up having a momentary handstand
Stall.
pause. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I mean,
And so
that's
this is how we explore. Yeah.
as kids, like if you're educating from a PE perspective, children
Yeah.
recognize the way children learn best is through play, not through sit down and take notes the way
Exactly.
adults associate learning. And I've always felt, because most of us, they stop their physical education at about year 10 or so when PE gets yanked out of the curriculum.
Which is
Then they get
crazy.
to
I don't get
30,
that.
40,
Yeah.
whatever. They've essentially got a sleepy 16-year-old body that hasn't done much physical activity for the last 20 years. Why wouldn't you keep a play element in there? It's actually going to be
Yeah.
a much faster way to learn skill. But you're right, it goes missing because people focus on sets, reps, and quantity rather than quality and even enjoyment.
That's it. Enjoyment. You nailed it. And I think that now you and I both, we enjoy pushing ourselves, but the thing is enjoyment in terms of doing something that maybe you didn't think you could do and you surprise yourself by doing it just for the sheer enjoyment of doing it. And that's to us what we're trying to come back to is we get to move. We have the opportunity to move. Now, there are people out there who don't have that opportunity. But if you have an able body, then let's use it. Let's not let it stagnate. And so that's where the play comes in. And then we finish up where the majority of people live, and that is in the push. So we've got prep, we've got practice, we got play, and then we've got push. And push is where you push yourself, okay? Again, we don't use repetitions. You could if you wanted to, but the goal here is to take a movement, and let's say that you mentioned the burpee. So in the programming, it could call for a pushing exercise. And you choose that exercise you want to do, but you have to make sure that you're doing it at a level of quality, a high quality of movement. And don't stop. So it might be 45 seconds. And the thing is if that quality of movement starts to wane, if it starts to go down, then you can always modify it. So instead of doing burpees, let's just change it to a regular push-up. Oh, you can't do those push-ups anymore? Go to your knees, but keep going. Make sure that quality is very, very high. And so this is how we're able to make these adjustments. And so during the process, we're allowing ourselves to understand that it's going to suck. We're going to suck. You need to make an adjustment and make sure that you're continuing to keep this high quality of form because that's what's going to get you strong and keep you from getting injured. And then we finish off with ponder. And ponder is simply taking a look back at that particular session. We also don't call it a workout, call it a session. And you look at your session and you say, hey, what went well? What was difficult? What do I maybe need work on? And then you go off and, have a beer, whatever you want. I mean, enjoy the rest of your life. But it's this process of looking at this, and there are two things in there, again, that play portion of it, and also the ponder portion of it that a lot of people don't do. And ponder could literally be 30 seconds, and you're done. But just the simple fact that you're saying, all right, how did that go? And the reason that I use the ponder is this. Let's say that you are working on a handstand, excuse me, and 2 days ago your handstand, you're kind of getting it. Today you go in there and your handstand went on vacation. You can't do anything. You start to get frustrated and you're like, damn it, why can't I do a freaking handstand? Blah. Okay, you get frustrated. Well, first off, frustration only leads to frustration, and that's not going to help you. So part of the thing with this, and especially with ponder, is as long as you ask yourself, okay, what did I learn today from this session? Then you'll never have a bad session, which means that you'll always be making improvements. And so I think the fact that we always put so much pressure on ourselves to think that we got to crush it, nail it, have the best session of our life every single session, that sometimes people just quit or they just get frustrated with themselves. So a big thing with me, especially nowadays, is I look at just being good enough. And some people hear me say that and they're like, why would you not want to be perfect? And I'm like, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the more good enough, moderate sessions you have over time, that actually builds up. So you look back to a year, the level of your moderate session compared to now is just crazy. And you've made so much improvement because you did it in a way that allowed you to continue to step on the mat and just simply do the work. And that is where the change happens. And so, yeah.
I have four things from that. So the first one's attachment. So
Yes.
being
Yes.
able, and I think, you know, as a aging athlete, you've got to be able to release the ego and the sense of self from your performance. Because if you stay attached only to performance, like, are you going to be mad at yourself at 70 because you can't do what you could do at 40 or 50? Like, that's a pretty ridiculous way to live, right? And you're only setting yourself up for failure and disappointment that way. So non-attachment, high performance mindset,
Yes.
though, the fact that you actually sit down after and say, what did I do, good or bad? What did I learn? What can I do better? That actual self-assessment, people don't usually go through that in any aspect. No. And the guys I've actually seen, and we'll talk about your martial arts in a minute, but the guys I see who progressed fastest at jiu-jitsu kept a notebook and were making notes after every session. Then skill acquisition. You can't work at your maximum and expect you're going to actually get new skills. And I used to teach motorbike racing, which is it's a weird thing to teach because your natural reaction in a car will probably crash a motorbike. Like if you go into a corner too fast in a car, you can hit the brakes and you're okay. You hit the brakes on a motorbike, you're going down. So, or you're going to run wide. It's one of those two things. So you have to actually learn to stay on the throttle when everything in your head is telling you to slow down. But you don't learn this at full speed. If you try it at full speed, you're panicked, right? Like your heart rate's too high. So you've got to keep actually the relative intensity of the session down so you can focus on having that space in your brain to fit the new skill in. And then finally, people, when they set impossible goals for themselves, your brain knows when it's it's something you can't do, right? Like if someone has to lose 100 kilos of weight, it's an impossible goal to them, but they could lose one. Like they can probably envisage how to lose one.
Exactly.
But when you set this impossible goal, sooner or later, the most disciplined person with the most willpower will still give up. You can't give someone an impossible task endlessly and expect they'll continue on that journey. They will give up sooner or later. And when you take out that attachment about it doesn't make me a good or bad person if I did or didn't do a handstand today, it makes it a lot easier for people, I think.
You know, that's three things. So first off, this is something that we talk about so much. And the way that I coach, you'll hear me say a lot, it's okay. No, it's perfectly fine. You're not a bad person. Like these are things I say quite a bit. And so they actually made we have a community called the Alpha Posse, which is a joke. Alpha, that was kind of, tongue in cheek. But a lot of people in there, they wanted to make t-shirts with some of my phrases. And one of them was, it's okay. It's perfectly fine. But attachment, I think, is huge. So it's funny you mention that because my background in Zen training, Zen Buddhism, as far as with the martial arts, this is something that, especially as we get older, that we really need to take a look at. And if we're still attached to thinking that when I was 25, I could do this, why can't I do this now? Then, well, for one, bad things are going to happen. But the other thing too is
just a number. You got a hard
it's just a number. You gotta want it, Usually, it's yeah. But it's just so interesting. And then the other thing is what you mentioned is bringing it down is slow it down. That's like probably the number one thing I say all the time. And I'm talking about like the movements themselves. And when you were talking about on the motorbikes, it's the same. You can fake things when you go fast. You just blow through them, okay? Or you can come crashing down. But if you slow things down, you're really going to see where you're having issues within that movement. You can work on that movement. You can make it better so that you can do it well at speed. And so that's why slowing things down for me is extremely important, especially when you're linking movements together into combinations. So then I forgot what I was going to say for the last one. But anyway, yeah, lots in there. You get me all excited talking about all my fun stuff.
Look, and I think, I mean, for me, I felt that physically, obviously, things change, but
Yes.
the game I can play forever is what's between my ears. So it doesn't matter
Yes.
what gets taken away from me physically. So I've been working on a lot of that with people. And I think, I mean, Zen Buddhism, Stoicism,
Yes.
they all
Yeah.
end up saying roughly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter
Yeah.
which philosophical like pathway you want to go down. But the main thing being that, if you're not happy with or without a muscle up, for instance, you're not going to be happy with one.
Exactly.
If you're not happy, I don't know, without the fancy car, you won't be happy with one. It's all about perception of self. But I think because there's so little people control, the
Yeah.
the fitness journey, for instance, is something you can control because you can control how you treat yourself. And all of a sudden, you've got this little sea of sanity that you can retreat to when everything else is very chaotic. And I can control what I eat today and make myself feel good about something that's happened today, even when everything's been terrible. I can go and hide in training, as it were, and make my body, like nourish my body and feel better about that. And then I can use those skills hopefully in the rest of my life. Like, hey, if I got up at 5 a.m. to train today, I can totally do that hard presentation in front of the boss that I'm really scared about. But
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
if I embraced the suck and did handstand training twice a day, well, I know I've got the discipline to go back to school and get my master's. Like I know I can do these things. I've displayed this. I just now need to take that skill and put it somewhere else.
And coming back to like what you were saying too is how do you do that? You make it so easy to start. It would be stupid not to do it. And so this is
Yeah,
why when a
totally.
person will come to me and say, I want to get 100 push-ups or something like that. And I'm like, all right, I just want you to do a single push-up every single day. And they're like, but that's too easy. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. If you say you're going to do 100 push-ups and there's one day where you go into it and you don't get those 100 push-ups or something comes up because you don't have time to do your 100 push-ups, then it's not going to happen. But if you just say, I'm just going to do one push-up and you end up doing 100 push-ups that day, hey, win. Let's win. And you're just building things up. And so this is, reminds me of my judo instructor, like way back. And when I was first kind of going, and I was pretty nervous because I was the only non-Japanese person there. And honestly, I was hungover. And the reason why is because in Japan, they drink like fish. And when you're the new guy, they basically take you out every single night after practice and just get you drunk on purpose. So, and I remember that, and I'm not kidding either. So I remember going in the next day and I was like, hey, coach, how tough is the training going to be today? And he was like, why? And I was like, well, I'm kind of not feeling it. And he said, you make it as tough as you decide it's going to be. And I, thinking back on that, when he said it to me, I was just like, shit. I still got to step on the mat. But what it did was I realized that I'm the one who determines how difficult it is going to be here.
Yeah.
And physically, it can really crush you. But as long as you're like, all right, this is making me stronger, as long as it is making you stronger, then it will make you stronger. And so all those years of me, being in Japan, learning the language, like being used to clean the mats, like while I was still in my uniform, like they were crushing me. It really toughened me up. And I realized that I could do more than I thought I really could, which is funny because when I actually started going into the business world, it completely changed because it was so new to me. I didn't think I could do anything. So even now, there are days when I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I don't want to post to Instagram. I hate
I know the
social
feeling. I
media.
know the feeling.
But it's funny because my wife is like, you can get on the mat and roll with guys for like 2 hours and you can't spend 5 minutes doing this. And I'm like, you're right. So it's always that perspective, right? So as long as you're looking at it and saying, okay, it's all related. Everything is related, and just Start small and build from there.
All you
Embrace the
can't
suck.
fail.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about your martial arts journey. So you started with judo, which is, I mean, the gentle art, which is like the funniest name ever for maybe the roughest martial art there is. And you've transitioned now into jiu-jitsu. How does that go with your body? I mean, most of the guys I know who are not black belts in their 40s really struggled physically. What have you done to stay healthy and keep training?
Yeah, the good, yeah. So actually, it's funny because in my hometown when I was in junior high, I actually started off with Aikido because that was kind of all they had. And thanks to that instructor, Michael Sheon is his name, he said, you need to go to Japan. He's like, because I was getting deeper into Aikido and I wanted to do Kendo and Judo, but they just didn't really have it around here, amazingly enough. And he was like, you got to figure out how you can go to Japan. And he was actually in Japan for about 25 years. And so he had moved back because I believe his father was ill. Anyway, but he played a pivotal part in getting me interested in going to Japan. And so I go to Japan and I'm doing judo. Absolutely loved it. Kendo, I was just really into Kendo and judo. Ended up graduating from uni, went back to Japan, was working, moved to Osaka, Japan. I was going to the Shudokan, which kind of interesting story. Inside of Osaka Castle is a martial arts complex. And guy from Wichita, Kansas, walking up to a castle and to basically, and getting thrown around and being the only Japanese at the time was pretty damn cool. But the thing is I had butterflies in my stomach every single day. And so I'm leading to your question, by the way. So I'm doing that. I end up working at the martial arts complex inside of a shrine in Osaka. And I was interpreting as well as translating there. And so I had the opportunity to work with all the instructors there. Everything from Shorinji Kempo, which I actually ended up, third degree black belt in Shorinji Kempo. I got my black belt in Aikido. I did Daitoryu Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. Black belt in Kendo as well as black belt in the Aido. I also trained.
How many black belts is that now? Is that 4?
That's 5. I have 5. Yeah. But the thing is it's like anything. If you just step on the mat enough, things will happen, And I just loved it. I just loved it so much. I kept doing it. But judo has always been my love. Now Kendo, of course, but like judo is like this what I think. And so the thing about judo is exactly what you said though. It's rough on the body. It's so rough on the body.
Who would have thought being hit with a planet was hard on the body?
That's the thing, right? So, the hardest punch is you hitting the ground. And so I got really beat up. And as a matter of fact, I had my shoulder dislocated, separated, a slap tear, and I had surgery, a bullet in there. I was from a
got slap tears.
Yeah, that was from a judo competition. That's when I quit. And so that was my last competition in judo. And I made a promise to my wife because she was like, you can't work if you're broken. I transitioned to just focus on Shorinji Kempo. Gave myself a little bit of a break from the grappling there. But then at a later stage came into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So my thing was I still wanted to do judo. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, though, to be honest, is just easier on the body compared to judo.
Yeah.
But the thing of it is that I was very particular about who I wanted to learn from. And so my journey through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've tried to keep it one where, this is going to sound bad, I'm not just doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with a bunch of young knuckleheads. That's something that I've always tried to stay away from. Now, I had a major injury in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which was with a knucklehead who had an ego, who, when I got on his back, he freaked out and turned, and his elbow smacked me directly in the eye, and I had a detached retina in 4 places and had to have surgery. So that has been really it. But the thing is,
big injury I remember is, I'm pretty sure it was your ankle.
My ankle, yes. Now, my ankle, there we go. There's another silly stuff. Me wanting to explore and do new things. I decided I wanted to skateboard. And I was with my friend and we were on a half pipe, and it was somewhere I've never been before. And I was warming up and it was outside and the board was cracked and we didn't know it was cracked. And at the very top, my skateboard got caught and I fell. And then when I fell, my foot actually got caught in the skateboard, outside break with full rotation of the ankle. And so 7 screws and a plate on one side and 2 screws in the other. But the thing is, though, me looking back at my judo and the way that I was
I just want to
trying
point
to,
out how
yeah,
well you still squat. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, I rolled my ankle and so, it's really tough for me to squat. I've seen you squat since surgery and it's still pretty. Like it's
thank you,
clear
sir.
if you do the work, you can get back.
And that's it. And that's really what I was just going to say. It's a matter of how you're working. And so when I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, even when my ankle was broken, I still did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it was who I worked with and how I worked. And so I didn't just go to a class and think that, I'm just going to jump in with class and things. So the training is extremely important, and the process of how you train is extremely important to me. And I was very lucky in the group that I was involved with in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's called Akatsuki, and it's actually the longest group that's been around in Osaka, and it was founded by my instructor and 2 of his friends. And what they did was they just got together and they trained in a way that would benefit each other. So it's actually similar in the principles of judo in the sense that it's a mutual
I think
study.
that's missing from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in my
I
experiences.
think so too.
Most people are keen to get their jiu-jitsu and they forget
Yeah,
that their partner has to get their jiu-jitsu too. I mean, there's nothing worse to me than you roll with someone and they just snatch you like 5 times in 5 minutes and then shake your hand and walk away. Like, you
yeah.
beat me with the exact same thing 5 times in a row. Are you going to at least tell me how you managed to do that or what one thing I could do to help prevent that happen? Like leave me with something so that this was
Exactly.
beneficial for both of us.
I think a big part, you'd find a lot of people who were former judo people who, it's because you're in Japan. And so I remember going to these practices. This is judo. This is judo. Going back to my judo practices when I was at the castle, and you had to be a black belt in order to participate in these practices. And you had all walks of life in there. And those mats, I mean, full. And so I practiced there a few nights a week, and then I was on the police team in Osaka, as a civilian on the police team there. And the thing of it is, though, is that when you're going against these judo people, you're all black belt, you don't know what level they are, but you know what level they are when you do it
When
with
they
them.
touch you,
And the cool thing is that generally they're going to throw you around, but then they're going to kind of let you throw them as well. And you don't really see that a whole lot in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So again, this mutual communication of sorts of, okay, let's help each other to get better. And this was my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu group. And I loved it. And so, this is how we never had an injury when we trained together.
oh no,
Never. Never. Not a single person there in our group had an injury when we worked together. Now, interestingly enough, when they would go visit other places and roll, there were injuries, a lot of injuries.
wow.
But when we worked together, the way that we trained, there was no injuries. So I moved to the United States at the end of October. And I was going to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu place here in Wichita. Lovely people. And I'm still friends with them, and I think it's great. But their style of training is kind of the typical style. I'm just not used to it.
Pahada 24/7 style.
Yeah, basically, you start off and you do like the line drills and the warm-ups for 15 minutes and then whatever, it's fine. But again, like with my background in judo, in the way that I teach, and so I was in charge of teaching the lower belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, helping them. And so it was this way of like, let's mutually help each other. Let's help each other to get better by doing things in a way that is going to help us to get better. And so my group now, it's called GUkai. And so I have my own group now, stepped away from that particular place. And so I've got a group, and already we got like 10 people. And we're just having a lot of fun because we have beginners. Like literally a guy just came off, not just off the street, but he joined. It's his first time doing it. And then very high level people that can work together and doing it in a way where no one is getting hurt, but people are getting better. But the thing of it is that we're also not focused on competition in the sense that I need to be the best. And so it's the mind frame again. Is this why it's even though I don't even like to say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because to me, well, for one, it's a whole other can of worms,
Absolutely.
But I do Jiu-Jitsu. And so the original judo is what I'm doing. And so, and the way that I'm looking at that and trying to share that here is with that mutual benefit of helping each other to get better. But we go hard, but again, no one is injured. And after the practice, people are like, wow, we really did it. But the thing is I make it in a way where the teaching has specific cues and focuses, just like we do in GMB. So it's not random at all.
I was going to say, you've created GMB Jiu-Jitsu. There's a new product for you, trademark. But this idea of collaborative communities and non-attachment, and like, I see how successful that could be. I mean, that saying, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together.
Far, you go. Exactly. And that's where it is right now.
Having a community, particularly as guys get older, like the group of friends you grew up with, you tend to get separated from them. Then
Right.
suddenly the only other men you're hanging out with, maybe a few people you might talk to from work, if you work in that kind of environment now.
Yeah.
Or they're the parents of your kids' friends.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So you don't really have a strong community anymore, but you've created a place for people to have one.
Yes. And so GM, of course, is what I do. I love it so much. My passion project, though, is this GUkai. And I just, so this summer, my family, we had a family vacation, and it just hit me. I told my wife, I'm like, this is what I want to really do. And she's like, I knew that years ago. I'm like, okay. So, but it's like exactly what you said. I'm not saying for the older athlete, but to be perfectly honest, it's invitation only. And it's not for people who are only concerned with competing. And so basically it's for people who want to move beyond that competition and actually be able to do this forever. And that's how we're looking at it. Again, training in a way that is going to be good for the body, more importantly, though, for the mind. And so that's really...
Steve Maxwell's getting older. There's probably a spot there for an aging coach, PE-minded, like jiu-jitsu guy to come along. That could be the next spot.
Yeah, man. Well, and that's the thing, and Steve and I, we talk every once in a while, and he recently got his brown belt, I believe. So good on him, right? And but the thing of it is, oh, not Steve Maxwell. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of somebody else. Yeah, but Steve, exactly. Steve Maxwell is just incredible, right? Like,
but
he's one of the first people. Yeah,
old school coach mindset in.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I think of Steve as a physical educator. Beyond anything else, and like a Jack LaLanne, like that kind of guy.
Yes.
Like spreading fitness to the masses through a variety of means. And actually, while we're talking about masses, because I'm really curious about your move to the US. Like, what are the biggest changes you've noticed from a health perspective moving from Japan to the US? Like, it must be pretty weird.
Yeah. And by the way, I was thinking of Steve Cotter. Yeah, sorry, I was mixing the people up. Yeah. Yeah, he got his brown belt recently. So that's, for some reason, I just had Steve Cotter in my mind, but not Steve Maxwell. Yeah, he's been black belt. He's like amazing, right? So yeah, forever. So
can you imagine wrestling him? That guy's a freak.
God, he is, right? Moving to the United States, yes. The major thing is the lack of walking. I think that to me, my wife also, I spend more time in the car. Like this, I'm sure it's probably an exaggeration, but I'll say it. But I think that I've spent more time in 1 month in the car here than I did in over a year in
Wow.
Japan. And I was really trying to think about this because you have to have a car in order to live here, basically, and especially where we are. And it's wild. And so the lack of walking, as well as the
Good
food,
quality
yeah,
because
the
the thing
food, yeah, the food, the
when I've
food is a
eaten in
big.
Japan, the quality of food is it's so fresh.
It's unreal. And so, of course, we're landlocked where I am, so we don't eat the fish here. But it's not just that; it's the vegetables, the freshness, like you said, it's just incredible. And we do miss that a lot, a lot. The other thing, though, I will say is this: is the attention to detail, the attention to detail. And so, little things like not just the food, but the way it's prepared and the way it's cleaned, the way that everything about it is just there's a purpose to what it's doing instead of just getting it out there, you know?
I think that's very much what you were talking about with training as well. People just want to move on to the next thing. They don't want to
Yeah.
make it as good as possible. And with business on the internet, a lot of times people would just tell you just get it out. Like speed of action is the
Yes.
thing that's rewarded most, not perfection. And
That's right.
when you start applying that idea to food, well, we end up with some pretty bad food pretty quickly.
Yeah. And, I will say there's some good food. What this is funny too. So we would maybe eat a cheeseburger 2, 3 times a year. But again, the cheeseburgers there, it's different. So it's like, we're talking like really good, like high quality meat and the vegetables are good. It's funny how, I mean, we don't eat a whole lot of cheeseburgers and things, but I know we've eaten more since we've gotten here than we did in like a year, in Japan. And we're pretty careful about how we eat, like really careful, to the point where my parents are just like, I don't understand how you can live that way. But we're the opposite. We're like, and I don't say anything, but I'm like, I don't understand how you can eat that. So, but again, I'm not trying to judge anyone at all. I'm just saying it's different. And so, having lived in Japan for so long, there are certain things that you get used to. Hell, over half of my life I lived in Japan. And so, looking at it that way, the culture shock, the reverse culture shock was huge. Me coming back to the United States at age 50, back to my hometown, things, of course, change. I change. My parents change. And just me forgetting a lot of the things. And it's been very good for me, to be perfectly honest. Here's my Zen Buddhism for you, where I look at it as my practice. It's my practice. And so when I run into things here where I want to go, what? Instead of doing that, I just go, okay, it is what it is. And that's what I'm able to just keep going, to be honest, because my wife and I are here for my kids, 100% for my kids, and also so that we can be close to my parents because they're getting quite a bit older.
Yeah, I
And
think
so, yeah,
my parents are about the same. So my brother moved
yeah,
interstate, and we would have liked to, but my parents are now early 80s, and someone
same,
should
yeah,
stay close by. So we did the same
yeah,
thing. Yeah, we had an
yeah,
opportunity to move out and went, no, we'll just stay close by.
sure, sure. But yeah, again, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm poo-pooing on everything because it's simply different. And there's both good and bad of everything. And all we're just trying to do is say, hey, listen, how are the kids doing? And the kids love it. And they're thriving. And really,
But
that's
obviously,
what's good for us.
what you would do to offset stuff in Japan, like obviously you'd walk more, the food was higher
Yes.
quality.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
had to make adjustments in terms of your non-exercise activity, even maybe food quantity, because maybe it's more
Yes.
energy dense than normal. So I mean, you guys have obviously had to change some stuff to maintain your.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've been following you for a long time. I don't think you've had a substantial change in body composition or body mass or anything like
No.
that,
I'm
despite.
actually more muscular. Yeah. Yeah. I'm a little more muscular simply for the fact that I've been doing more kettlebell training, to be honest. I really enjoy that now. But what has changed is that I'm actually focused on cardio, which I've just always gotten my cardio through me walking, riding my bicycle everywhere, doing tons and tons of martial art, plus along with my GMB. Whereas right now, for example, this morning, I was up and dropped my daughter off at cross country practice, and I go out. Today was just my walk, so I just did an hour walk with my dog. But like yesterday, there was an electrical storm outside, so I just did 20 minutes of stair climbing up and down our stairs. And again at like 5 a.m. It's just a little bit different, I would say. It's more programmed rather than spontaneous. I
I think it's
still,
it's tough to
yeah,
make that playful unless you've got some people you can play tag with.
right. But again, it's one of those things where I do it, and my daughter's, I got it. I have to get up to take my daughter to cross country practice, so I do my walk, and I still have time, so I sit and I do my zazen, my meditation, and then it's usually time to go pick her up, and then get
I'm
everybody
very
ready for
impressed
school.
that your kid is running at 5 o'clock in the morning. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and so she's doing great and really excelling with that. It's new for her. She's never run before, and so she made it on the varsity cross country team, which we're all shocked. Good on you, but new experience, and she's really doing well. And what we try to do with my kids is say, okay, you're here to learn English because English is not their native language, and so they're here to learn English and experience American life because they're part, American. And so by doing sport, it's been a great opportunity because it's actually a gateway that allows them to communicate non-verbally, but also learn the culture while they're doing it and ease them into being more confident in their speaking because they have the confidence of their bodies. So this is the
And
thing
gives
when
them
I
that community of shared interests they can belong to.
exactly. And so back in Japan, I opened up that kids gym for my kids. And so they've always been extremely active. Like the other day at school, they had a physical fitness test, and the girls were only supposed to they didn't have to do any chin ups. All they had to do was like think. And my daughter was like, "Can I do chin ups?" And they're like, "If you want." And she did 18.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And like beat all the other boys, right? And so like that's my bragging thing of being a parent. But the other thing is shouldn't that be not maybe normal, but shouldn't everyone be able to do at least a few pull-ups, and
Well, that would
well,
be,
chin-ups,
I'm sure you know
yeah,
about the Lafayette High School program.
dude, that's just amazing, right? And recently that you kind of seeing more of that, it's kind of coming back, and people are posting that on the social media. That was incredible, absolutely. Was that 19? Is that right? It was
Yeah.
around that.
I've like gone around and found, like excerpts of the manual and what the actual workouts
Really?
were. Yeah, like I,
Wow.
I spent weeks like really diving deep into it. I even made for clients, it's a body weight program based on that. And
Really?
there's two versions. I've made like an A and a B version for like most people, and then like because they had a graded standard for the kids, and so
Yeah.
like I've basically got a really high performing version and a normal version. But even just the warm up, most people will be
Oh,
so exhausted after the warm up that they're done.
yeah, right? Yeah. No, that was incredible. But yeah, that was my thing with the kids is I always wanted my kids to be able to be comfortable in their bodies. So my wife and I don't push our kids to do anything, which a lot of
You
people
lead
might
from
be
the front.
surprised. Yeah. We're like, my daughter was like, "Hey, I want to do cross country." And I'm like, and then I didn't say, "Well, you've never done that before." I was like, "Sweet, try." You know? And I remember the first day I took her and she came back. She's like, "Oh my God, that was so hard." But, but, but she gets it because she's my daughter and she knows that It's gonna suck. Okay, you're gonna suck. But if you just keep showing up, then you're gonna get better. And sure enough, that's what it is. And so, I'm really proud of her for that. And so that's really kind of just, again, with GMB, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to support people at their level. At their level. And that's why there's no standards or anything that we have. It's okay, what do you need to be fit for?
That's
okay, let's help you to do that.
Segue, because I have, it's two last questions for you.
Yeah.
One is, you posted a while back about, hey, everyone should bear walk and Frogger every day. And so I've been doing that. And that's a great start to the morning on top. So I just do some joint mobility. And we've got, I call it a hot dog house. You've got
Cool.
like one main corridor with rooms that come off the side. And so like our main corridor.
That's awesome.
It's about 20 meters. And so I can bear walk quite a long way before I need to even turn around. And then I can Frogger back and that's it. So that for me is good. But if you had to name 2 or 3 things you thought people could add into their day that would make a tremendous difference for how they moved, their martial arts ability, all that kind of stuff, what would they be?
Yeah. So recently I put a lot of thought into this, obviously GMB, but the other reason is, again, coming back to this Juyukai, this martial art group that I have. And so one thing would be hanging. And so I think brachiation is so important. And so being able to hang, and there's studies showing that grip strength correlates to longevity. And a lot of people are thinking, oh, I just need to have, these grippers. But it's not that. It's the fact that you actually put work into being able to support yourself and use your hands to grip things and hold things is actually what allows you to be strong and improves that for the longevity. And so one thing that we can do is we can work on hanging, like from anything. And so whether it be a bar, a pair of rings or something, but it's also going to look at scapular health. And so this is one thing that, improving the shoulder joint, the shoulder capsule, as well as the back and the grip. And then also a little bit of core in there, to be perfectly honest, not much, but you still got to be able to support yourself when you're there. So being able to hang, working up, I think a minute is a great place to aim for. Start off with just 10 seconds. That's it. And then gradually over time work up. So that's the first thing. The other thing that I would really think a lot of us would benefit, this is one thing. We don't have furniture in my house. Actually, I lie. My parents gave us a sofa that my dog uses. And I've got a chin-up bar in our living room. So that's our furniture. But
I have a VersaClimber and a treadmill.
I love it. But I think, though, that being able to get down to the ground on the floor and then back up off the floor, I think, is up there as well. And so
that
it could be
test that came out with, can you get up and down without your hands, and you can figure out mortality based on how many points of contact you have. Yep.
I think that's so important. And so whether that be via a squat, via a lunge, it really doesn't matter. Just the simple fact that you're getting up and off, or getting down to the floor and back off the floor, is huge. Now, in Japan, bring it back to Japan, in that there's not a whole lot of furniture over there. Nowadays, yes, but typically everything was on the floor. And so you see a lot of elderly people still being able to squat. The other thing too, to be honest, when I first went to Japan, where I was staying, university, they didn't have Western toilets. It was a squat, and I got really good at squatting that way. So that's the second thing I would say. So hang, squat, get down to the floor, up off the floor. And then the other thing is moving around on the floor. There's 2 ways of doing this. And I'll just keep it super simple. Face down and face up. And just think about it that way. So, pronated, so supine position, and then looking at it, doing things in that way. And that's why I don't even want to say how to do it. And notice that when you hang, I didn't say how to do it. Getting down to the floor, back up, I didn't say how to do it. Crawling on the ground, facing the ground, not going to tell you how to do it. Facing up off the ground, not going to tell you how to do it. The reason for that is those movements, I think, are important, but This is where the creativity comes into play. This is where exploration is important, and this is what can keep us young because we're using our mind. If we simply say, oh, just do this movement, what happens is, like anything, the first time we do it, we bring awareness. But when you do something over time, you start to lose that beginner's mind, if you will. But if you can simply say, okay, I'm just going to crawl today face down or face up, and try to do it differently each day, this is really what I think will keep people healthy, both mentally and physically.
Yeah, super. And finally, if someone was coming into GMB and was looking for which program to start with, where would you steer them as a most likely place to start?
Very simple. Start with elements. If you are sure that GMB is something you want to use. If you're not sure, go check out YouTube, go check out Instagram. Don't buy anything just yet. Just make sure it's going to be a good fit for you. But elements, the reason that I suggest this for everyone is we have 3 tracks. And so if you're just coming off the sofa, if your wrists are really tight, if you can't even squat down, we got you covered. That first track is for you. Now, if you have pretty okay general fitness, if you've been training and doing other stuff, then the general track is going to be good for you. And then if maybe you're pretty peppy, you can do some kind of, stuff there. We have an accelerated track. That's the 3rd track. So the thing is, they're similar movements. It's just the focus is different on how you do it, the adjustments to that. And elements. That's it.
I think the thing for me is, so, I often see people say, oh, so-and-so can do this, and, picking some Instagram person. And I always think, if we use Charles Poliquin as an example.
Yes.
Charles Poliquin had hundreds of high-level athletes that had followed his training. It shows you that his thing worked, right?
Yeah.
And if I look at Ito is another great example in that kind of a similar scene, but probably a slightly different focus than you. Although I think he's changing that as he gets older. I see he's got a more movement, less tricks, just like you were talking about. But I've been to movement camp. I've seen, again, 100 people who do his thing, who have a good result. And when you post, hey, GMB, because you've got people who are studying to become GMB trainers.
Right,
you've got
the apprenticeship, yes. Yeah.
People who are following your programs, and you're posting their results. Your stuff works. I see a lot of people following your stuff who all move well. And that to me is a sign of, that's a system. That's not a bag of tricks. That's actually a thing that works, and because it's repeatable. And, for me, always, because I'm looking at stuff with my coach's eye, I don't care what one person looks like, or I don't care what the person who made the program looks like. If here's one example, a guy who used to be the head coach at Jim Jones when I was going there, he's 6'3", he's 120 kilo, he fought in the UFC, he was a Div 1 wrestler, but if you're born to be 6'3" and 200 pound in fight shape,
yoked, yeah.
You are not a normal human being. You can do anything. But when I see a repeatable result, I see hundreds of people getting the same thing. It says to me that system really works. So, Elements is definitely a great starting place. I've got that program. As I said, I don't think you can access them anymore. Some of the original rings and parallettes and things like that.
I don't even know, yeah. So,
but even focused flexibility, I really liked focused flexibility. Yeah, that was fantastic.
Cool. Thank you so much.
And even just it was as simple as that daily stretching routine. It only took 20 minutes. That made a tremendous impact on people when I gave it to them. So, like I said, repeatable result. That's the thing I get most from you guys is systemized progress.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Really appreciate that.
I don't want to take up any more of your day. I know it's getting close to dinner time for you, and it's dog walking time for me. So we both.
Yes. Thank you so much. Looking forward to chatting to you again soon. Yeah.
Thank you very much, man. It's been a pleasure. Stop to record there, Ryan. Thank you so much, man. It's been.
Thank you. I hope that